Good morning, everyone. This is Asha Nayaswami, and here we are, still sheltered in place, most of us. Okay, let's hold on 1 second. Techie problems to be sorted. Okay, now we're ready. You know, on NPR, which I sometimes listen to, are we hearing? Are we going? Just a second, folks. We need confirmation from the techies that you're actually hearing me. Okay, we've got it. On NPR radio, which I listen to sometimes when I'm in the car, after every program, they give a long list of all the people that you don't hear who are making it happen. And I'm just doing these little broadcasts from my house, but I have a rotating cast of heroes and heroines who come in here and make it happen, and I understand why those long lists are presented every time. For people such as myself in front of the camera, I would have no idea how to do it without them. All right, let's begin with the prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. We offer our lives with deep devotion into your hands. Guide us and bless us, that we may live our lives according to the highest ideals. And then when the incarnation comes to a close, we will be able to look back with satisfaction at a life of Dharma and selfless service, leading to a present and a future of eternal joy. Om. Peace. Amen. We just finished Easter, April 2020, and we had to do our Easter service. We usually have this huge Easter service, lots of people, of course, lots of color, lots of huge altar, and we dance and we sing and we have all this chanting, and we did a lot of it via recording in the empty temple, this big empty temple, with a few wonderful techies who are making the whole thing happen and all the music being recorded. And it's astonishing that the vibration of spirit is still there. And I think it's the sincere devotion. We had more than 200 people watching us online, which is more than, well, that sometimes the temple can be that full, but this has all been such an interesting experience in the difference between form and spirit. Magnetism creates inspiration, but magnetism can be generated in all kinds of ways, is what we're discovering. So I hope, I pray that this will be a unique Easter in history, but if it's not, we'll find a way. So today I wanted to answer a few questions. I get emails from time to time from various sources, including from this broadcast, so do feel free to write to me. My address is really simple, asha@anandapaloalto.org, or I'm easy to find. Just start Googling my name and you'll get lots of choices. And I just said I'd answer a few of them today. So let's see, where would I start? Oh, this was the one that actually prompted me first. This individual writes to me, lately I've been dealing with something that I wonder if you could shed some light on. I have been dealing with a lot of anger because of what someone did to me. More exactly what I've been dealing with, I love the way he honestly puts that, is a burning desire to get revenge. Very honest statement, which I appreciate. It's not a joke, I'm sure, to him, but the burning desire to get revenge is no small thing. Of course, everyone tells me that revenge isn't the answer and I should forgive, but I'm not convinced that revenge isn't the answer. It seems like the only thing that will heal my anger is to get even. I really appreciate it when people are honest, I have to say. I guess my question is, why shouldn't I take revenge? Because if I just forgive him, wouldn't I be letting him off the hook? So I think that's very real, because what we're really trying to do in our lives is we're trying to live by Dharma. Dharma is right action, and is that action which will lead to freedom. So when we think that somebody has acted in a way that is inappropriate, sometimes we misunderstand, and that's part of what I think we need to work about here, what it really means to forgive. To forgive someone is not to condone what they did. And to forgive someone needs to be very carefully worked out in the way that one expresses it, not only from within oneself, but perhaps even outwardly. Because you really don't want to give people the idea that their behavior is okay. There's a whole huge psychological system which is called enabling. And it came out of the addiction world primarily, but enabling is really a bad thing to do when someone using the subject of alcoholism or substance abuse or any kind of addictive behavior, which in its extreme enables us to see what the issue is. Sometimes if someone is in close relationship with let's say an alcoholic, because that's the simplest, instead of actually confronting that person with the fact that this behavior is unacceptable, the individual, in the name of loving them, accepting and forgiving them, will continue to just make it possible for the person to continue in that bad behavior. Whether it's paying the bills or keeping up the front or running the business or whatever it might be, one allows the person to behave badly, but then just keeps covering, and so you enable the addictive behavior to go on. People do this for a lot of reasons: to protect the children, to protect their assets, to protect the friends, the alcoholic's name in the reputation in the neighborhood, whatever it might be. But ultimately, it's not good for the person doing it, and it's not good for the alcoholic, because they never actually get the consequences of their behavior, and so they don't have to mature and see it. So that's a whole world in itself, which is easy to explore, so I'm not going to go there. So there is something to the truth that you shouldn't be a doormat, you shouldn't stand up, you shouldn't participate in something that is not dharmic, which is the person's alcoholism, for example, or whatever caused my friend here to write to me. Somebody did something that was wrong. Let's assume it was wrong and that my friend hasn't just simply misread it. But let's say it really was wrong. I'm not going to be a doormat. And there is no reason to be a doormat. Swami Kriyananda was not a doormat. He just, when he carried on a certain action that was just very surprising to me, in quiet defiance of someone who seemed to be a senior to him in spiritual life, or at least in the monastic order he was part of, I said, why did you resist so strongly? And he just said very quietly, nobody treats me that way. Just like, nobody treats me that way. And it wasn't ego, it was just not right. Their behavior wasn't correct, and there was no reason for him to cooperate. But Swami wasn't angry. He wasn't at all angry. It was he himself calmly and quietly chose, this is right behavior. This person is trying to take advantage of me. I'm not going to let him do it, period. And I will just quietly and strongly resist. But there was no anger in Swami doing that. He did it out of commitment to the principle, not out of a personal need to assert himself. So the question is not whether you take revenge or not. The question is not whether you forgive. The question is, what is the key thing that's really motivating you? Now, oftentimes when we're enabling people's wrong behavior, we call it love for that person, but virtually always, what it actually is fear of what might happen if I didn't. Fear that there's going to be a divorce, fear that there's going to be a scandal, fear that people will think I'm a fool. So it's not just the external action, it's what's motivating us at the heart of it. If it's genuine, impersonal regard for that person. You see, Master could be very stern with people. Master could stand up very strongly and declare that whatever needed to change for that person needed to change. And as Swamiji described it, no matter how stern Master was with them, they were always able to accept it because there was no trace of egoic need in Master, because there was no ego. Master's entire and only concern was for the welfare of the person he was dealing with. So it was a genuine gesture of love. So when my friend writes and says, if I forgive him, if I accept, if I don't retaliate, he'll get away with it. And the implied is that's not good for him. But the problem is, when my friend is writing, and he freely admits it, he's angry. He wants to assert his ego over the ego of this other person. And yes, it would be nice for that other person to get the karmic feedback he needs. But trust me, he will. There's no possibility that he's going to get away with this. He might get away with it for longer than you would like. He might even get away with it for a whole incarnation, but it will catch up with him. And I have to ask, without knowing the details of the situation, maybe that's what's happening to my friend. Maybe wrong action from the past that he was powerful enough to plow through has now caught up with him, and his friend has now smacked him. But the issue is, once we give into anger, once we give into fear, then what we are perpetrating in our own consciousness is anger and fear. And if we perpetrate anger and fear in our consciousness, we're the ones who get the endless karmic rollout of the consequences of anger or fear. The other person is actually quite incidental to the equation. They have merely been the catalyst for us to get the opportunity to deal with anger and to deal with fear. And how we take that opportunity is how our lives unfold. So when we are confronted with an overwhelming desire to crush someone, we have to ask ourselves, what will that really give me in the end? So I crush him. So what do I have then? So then he's mad at me. And then, since I have acted in anger, I've set a boomerang of anger out into the world. I've given 2 classes in these broadcasts on karma, and I have countless other classes on karma in my YouTube channel. But you've set a boomerang of anger out, and anger is an alternate theory of happiness, that anger is going to make me happy, that you're going to have to learn that it doesn't. And the way we learned it is because it hits us and we begin to experience and we realize it's not a good thing. So if you act in anger, even if you feel righteous, he deserves my anger, what you've actually done is you've set up judgment, lack of compassion, lack of forgiveness, lack of selfless desire to help, and it will come around and it will exactly happen to you. And you won't like it when it happens. So you have to decide, and you can make a decision, whether the temporary pleasure of getting it over this guy by showing him is going to be worth the experience. And lots of times we decide it is. And then we can't complain, though, when it hits us in the head again, which in fact it may be right now in this situation. Now, the desire to actually help someone to realize, I need to stand up to you for what you've done, that's quite different. And if fear is also at the basis, which fear is usually at the basis even of anger, sometimes we have to at least try. So I'm not saying that always turning the other cheek, saying nothing, going away is a good idea. Sometimes within ourselves, we realize what this lesson is about for me is self-worth, self-respect, courage, standing by my own truth. So if it is simply necessary to speak or to act, we need to act with the purest motive we can act with, knowing that what I'm working with is not trying to get over him, but trying to be clear and strong in myself. There was a period of time in my life when I had to be very rude and very aggressive. I happened to be living in New York City, which was a perfect place because people didn't really notice. It's quite different than living in San Francisco. And I wasn't really angry at anyone, but I was a coward. And I allowed people to behave improperly to me, not in any significant areas. Actually, there was a few significant areas in my life which I didn't have the courage to face, but I practiced where it was easier. So I just had to stand up. When people cut in line or were rude to me or took my taxi or overcharged me for groceries, I had to stand up firmly each time. But it had nothing to do with the person getting away with it. It was for me to build up my confidence that I could speak my truth, and that if even if people didn't like it, nobody treats me that way. So you see, it's all very complicated. I'm giving a general answer here, but that's sort of the picture. Now I'm going to talk about a different question that I have that's actually related to this one, which is similar. This person talks about being centered and says, I work in an office environment and I can be centered in my work, but I have a hard time controlling myself or responding in a centered way when I'm talking to people or when they ask me questions. It feels like the peace in my heart flies away and I easily get into reaction mode. So he asks for, techniques. I'm going to talk about it more in a general way. Being nervous around other people, and this person tells me that they're generally an introvert. Being nervous around people is understandable. A lot of us are, whether it shows or not. Other people are unpredictable, and we don't always know what they're going to say. And if we don't know ourselves well enough, often our own reactions surprise us. This is what this man is saying. As long as nobody disturbs me, I can be calm, but as soon as any other energy comes into my atmosphere, there's a couple of things actually that more or less are techniques I would recommend. Swamiji made an interesting comment in a talk I was listening to recently. He said most people are a little hard because they're always preparing themselves to be attacked. I thought that was interesting. Now, a number of times in our lives that we actually are attacked, I mean really attacked, not just a rude word here and there, but that people really go after us. It happens, but it doesn't happen as often as we fear it will happen. I myself, I wasn't exactly afraid of people. Let me think how to say this, but I always felt I had to protect myself a little bit from people, and this is something I feel that I've, with the grace of God, come to peace with, because I used to imagine, how would I say it? I used to imagine that I was being hurt when I wasn't being hurt at all. People were just being themselves, and it was that I had all these ideas about how my environment had to be, and it gradually crossed my mind that they were just ideas, that people's words most of the time were just their words. They're just their personalities. And if I thought more about them than about myself, which is, who are you and how can I help you? The idea of becoming reactive is because I'm thinking about myself. When I was 18 and Vivekananda in his book said to me, don't think about yourself and you'll be happy, I thought, what else is there to think about? It was like, don't you always just think about yourself? And the way I was, which was true, I wasn't selfish. I just by nature I was generous and enthusiastic, but I was always self-concerned. What about me? What about me? What about me? How do I fit? What about me? How do I fit? And so I was always calculating my own position. And it was only very slowly that I realized it just simply isn't necessary. And I learned it by just thinking about the other person. When somebody comes into my environment, I think, who are you? How can I help you? And I began to practice, and this is just what I can suggest. And if you're in an office situation, it's a good place to practice because it's usually just one person at a time. I would feel this tension in my heart, literally. It would be like almost physical. Deep breathing is one way to get rid of it. I find that controlling my thoughts is one of the best ways for me to work. And I would actually just look and be with people and say, Divine Mother, bless us all. And instead of looking people in the eyes, Swami suggested you look slightly toward the spiritual eye. And here's another wonderful thing. When people come to you, you pray not only about them, but you actually pray to them. And I don't mean that, yes, everybody is a manifestation of God, but you ask the super consciousness of the person you're with, how can I help you? What do you want from me? Even just your business associates, even just the store clerk. There was this man who worked in a store near here. And I don't know what his history was, but I suspect he had substance abuse. He seemed like a very gentle, very sweet man, and much more capable than the work he was doing, which is often what happens to people if they get addicted to things, is that their trajectory gets really confused. But every time I would go in there, I would see him, and I would focus at his spiritual eye, and I would say, what does your soul need? What does your superconscious want from me? And it was never more than just light conversation, but there was such a feeling of how can I serve? Instead of how can you serve me, it's how can I serve you? And Vivekananda said, if you don't think about yourself, you'll be happy. So all of this anxiousness, lack of centeredness, reactiveness, is always because what's in it for me? And I remember when I was trying not to be afraid of people. That was the only way I can put it. Just trying not to be afraid of people, trying not to see them as a threat. I would actually just sort of sit there breathing, focusing at the spiritual eye, trying to tune into their soul, and I would just ask myself minute to minute, is there anything bad happening? No. This person is talking, perhaps. Perhaps he's talking louder than I want him to talk. Perhaps his conversation is not interesting. Perhaps I'm not sure how to answer him. But is there anything actually happening in the moment that is really the least bit upsetting in and of itself? And then I would just say, no, no. And then Divine Mother started playing with me when I was sort of really getting better at just being like this. Oh, there's one more technique that I'll offer. Instead of making yourself like a steel plate when people's energy comes to you, someone suggested you make yourself like a sieve with a lot of holes in it. Because what causes reaction is the energy comes and you freeze, and then it bounces back. But if the energy just comes and passes through you, it neither taints or troubles you, nor does it bounce back, it just passes through. So I would sit there and I would feel my heart, closing is actually the word, but tensing, therefore creating hardness, therefore energy would bounce back. And if I just could literally just relax my heart and just let words or energy just pass through me, I didn't have to keep it. If the person I was with wasn't compatible with my vibration, because you can love someone even if they're not compatible, if it wasn't a vibration I wished to hold, I would just let it pass through me. I would let them have the freedom of my listening and hearing and wanting to help, but just letting it pass through, just letting it pass through. And I remember in this period of time, I used to be very protective of my personal space, and everybody has different ideas of what personal space is enough. And there was this wonderful man who was only around for a brief time. I have no idea where he went. He was very loud, which is not my favorite way for people to talk, although now I don't much care. At that point, I was very sensitive to loud. He was also big, very big, and he also thought that enough personal space was about 4 inches. So this loud, big person would lean over me and talk to me about whatever he wanted to talk about. And English wasn't his first language, so it always took him more English words than it would have taken a first language speaker. But I just got to practice. Is there anything wrong? Is there anything actually happening that I actually have to feel nervous about? And then I would just think, how can I help you? And one of the ways I could help him was just to accept him. I thought, oh, so many people must reject you because you're difficult. But you're just noisy and you're just close. That's all you are. Why would that bother me? And it got to be lots of fun. It just got to be lots of fun to separate myself from my anxious preconceptions. Is this easy? No, of course it's not easy. But is it any fun just to continue as we are? What is the future of the way we are? I mean, I often think to myself, heavens, I hope this isn't the apex of my personal development, because if it is, this is very pathetic. So wherever it hurts me, wherever my edge of tension is, then I have to push past it. All relationships are sadhana, and I don't mean that in a bad way. All relationships are the wonderful opportunity to grow closer to God, because God is present everywhere. So even in these very little things, even in the office, just this is my opportunity to practice. This is God calling me as deeply as He calls me to meditate, which is, I'm hiding in this form. Can you see me? And you say, not today, sir. Well, then how about tomorrow? And then we just get to try until we win. Now, I had one more, which I'll just talk on briefly here. This person says something like, what's the words here? Oh, it says, do you think all the electronics and the phones and the isolation and the speed of life today is causing immense mental health problems? Yes. But it's not, I don't mean mental health like certifiable necessarily, but what I mean is that, and of course, we're terribly out of balance, but this is the appropriate time for us to live in which we have to work hard to live rightly. It's the world as a whole is not. It's a very divided world right now because we're moving into a higher yuga. So there are all these forces that are inspiring us to good, and there's all these forces that are pulling us away from it. I'm doing noon broadcasts, which I encourage you to watch. It's Conversations with Asha, Millennials Speak. And I'm interviewing in sequence 5 millennials who are key leaders in our community just for a lot of reasons, and also because it's great fun. And one of the interviews I did with Tandava was about trends in literature and also in movies as an extension for the times that we live in. And really, I was a tourist in a strange land talking to him about this, he was talking about Game of Thrones, which I've heard continuously, but I never even actually knew what it was. He says it's part of a trend that actually has a name, and it's called grim dark. Grim and dark. And I know that Game of Thrones is enormously popular. And my friend was talking about the psychological effect it had on him because he read, I guess, the books at the beginning before he repudiated it completely. But in countless ways that people have no idea. There is what I have to just use the right words. It's a satanic force. But it's subtle because Satan is not stupid. It's very subtle and it's very powerfully done. And it's just telling us slowly by slowly, there's really no divine force in this world. There's really no force of light in this world. And light really isn't the most powerful force. The most powerful force is depression and sadness and a terrible ending to everything. And my friend was talking about how in that particular series and in others, the good guys always die or lose. And all of this is just coming into people's consciousness and we don't even know it. But we have to pay attention to how this is affecting us and repudiate it with all our energy. This is a wonderful time to be living because we have to be active in our spiritual search. We have to actively reach for the light. And in that way we become very powerful in what will really take us to what we really want with all our hearts. Joy, joy, joy. God bless you.